It's awesome to have you here. We do these sessions once a month. These are a collaboration between MCJ and Climate People. My name is Leonie. I'm head of membership and talent at MCJ. MCJ is an early stage VC fund that backs founders driving the transition of energy and industry and tackling the impacts of climate change. We do this via being a VC fund, but also via our membership known as the MCJ Collective and our media platform with the Inevitable podcast. Over to Natalie to introduce Climate People.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. It's good to see so many familiar faces. Hi, I'm Natalie. I head up marketing for Climate People. Climate People's a climate technology recruitment and advisory firm. So essentially operate like any traditional recruitment agency would, but we only work with companies that are working on climate solutions. And of course, the other half of that is working with a lot of job seekers to help get more people jobs in this space. So really operating with that sole mission of mobilizing a workforce transition to climate. So yeah, super excited to do these sessions every month to get to know more job seekers who are looking to transition into this space. So thanks, Leonie, for the opportunity to introduce us.
No, of course. We have had quite a packed 2024 collaborating on these monthly meetups. We've covered everything from negotiation tactics through to personal brand building, through to tips and tricks to navigate LinkedIn, how to learn about climate, all with the theme of advancing your career, whether you are currently a job seeker or you think you will be in the future, or whether you're just always looking to upskill and to kind of stay clued in on trends and tips in this space. Today is our last meetup of the year, as you would have guessed. It is December after all. And so we are really excited to take a moment to look back at 2024, but also look ahead to 2025 and have an open and honest conversation about what we see coming over the horizon. We're going to do this via a panel that I'm really excited to introduce in just a moment. And then also we're going to make sure that there is a really significant time for you to ask any questions that you have. And we'll do this via breakout room Q&A sessions with each of the panelists. So please do take note as we go through the first half of this session of any thoughts that are top of mind or questions you want to ask them, because you will absolutely have the opportunity to do so. We always try and make these sessions as participatory as possible, but also as rich in learnings as possible as well. So without further ado, because you did not come here to hear from me, I am really excited to introduce our panelists. We have Brendan Anderson, who is the founder of Climate People, who you've just heard a little bit about, but are about to learn more about as well. We've been collaborating with Climate People for a long time, and Brendan is a long-time MCJ member. And so I'm really excited to hear all his pearls of wisdom, because there are always plenty. We also have Caroline, who is the Associate Director at Diversa Partners. Diversa Partners, Caroline will tell us more about, but are a specialty exec search firm that build leadership teams for growth stage and venture-backed companies. Caroline has a particular focus on climate tech, and we've really enjoyed collaborating with her at MCJ as well. And then we have Antoinette, Senior Manager of Career Pathways at Impact, a really, really foundational is the word that I would use to describe it, organization in this space, a nonprofit investor for the past 10 years and more, who've helped over 150 companies and taken a particular focus on how climate tech interacts with the communities in which it exists, and how we embed equity and access into climate solutions as well. So I've certainly learned a lot from my conversations with Antoinette in the past, and I'm excited for us to all do so today. Without further ado, I would love for each of you to actually say a little bit more about your organizations and what your kind of function and focus within them is. What does talent mean to you, and how are you supporting the kind of green skills, green talent transition at large? Should I start with you, Brendan?
Thanks, Leonie. Yeah, so as Natalie mentioned, Climate People is a climate technology recruitment firm. I started the business 4 years ago. I've been a recruiter for 25 years. The first 20 plus it was traditional Silicon Valley tech recruitment, always working on the agency side, so partnering mostly with education technology and healthcare technology companies. I live in the Boston area, so there's a lot of that around here. And eventually I wanted to transition my career to support companies that were doing more to address climate change. The struggle that I found as a job seeker, going back now probably about 8 years ago when I really started seriously investigating it, is that there just weren't any recruiting firms out there that were supporting this transition. The few firms that I found were really energy specific recruitment firms. And while they had some resources and recruiters that were focusing on renewable energy, they also had divisions that were supporting fossil fuel interests. And that wasn't something that I was interested in. So I just kept tracking the space for several years until I eventually got the courage. And we'll probably be talking a lot about the new administration, but I started this company during the previous Trump administration. So I'm bullish on what the future looks like still in climate tech. I think it will be some uncertain waters, but I'm still really excited about the work that we do. The majority of our work is really focused on supporting the companies that hire us and pay us to go find very specific talent that they're looking for. So in addition to that work, for anybody who's shown up for these events before, you've probably seen Natalie. What we try to do is just educate and help as many job seekers as possible, even if they're folks that we may not necessarily be placing into a job, but just give each individual job seeker that's interested in transitioning their career into climate the resources and the tools and the learnings that we have collected from the years that we've been doing this. And as the market changes, try to equip folks with as much information as possible so that you can go do it on your own. So that's part of the mantra for our company, not just to support the companies that pay us, but to help others make that transition. So great to be here.
Awesome. And for that, I'm going to put you on the spot next.
All good. Hello, everyone. My name is Antoinette West. I'm the Senior Manager of Career Pathways at Elemental Impact. And a little bit about us. We're a nonprofit investing platform, and we focus on scaling climate technologies for deep community impact. So we are helping founders and what we call traditionally excluded founders, to those that are BIPOC, women from frontline communities in general, and figuring out how to support their businesses across energy, transportation, food, water, agriculture, in general, helping to build and scale their companies and bring their technologies out of their brains, out of the labs, into real homes, schools, and neighborhoods. With that in mind, we also wanted to make sure that while that work is being done, we're connecting them to talent across the country to help them accomplish their goals, and especially within that talent, making sure that they're representing the communities that they want to serve. And so that we found that there were pretty limited pathways into climate careers. And so in 2020, similarly, we created the Edict Internship Program, which is a program that I lead, summer 10-week paid internship program that again tries to match climate talent across the country with climate organizations within our ecosystem, and really amplifying that diversity comes from anywhere, represented of course, by race and ethnicity, but also by experience. Those in frontline communities that have experienced hurricanes, that have experienced droughts and fires and environmental racism, all these things. How can they bring their skills and experiences to companies, in addition to whatever education, trade, other additional skills that they may have? In addition to the large umbrella that is an Elemental, we also have a policy lab that helps connects our organizations to the different policy levers that will help them accomplish their work. We engage with different corporate entities and matching our startups and their technologies with larger organizations. But really excited to be here today. I have more of a lens of early career talent, but excited to answer any questions and bring that perspective. So thanks for having me here today.
Of course, of course. And we are looping from more of a lens of early career talent through to more of a lens of exec talent. So Caroline, over to you to tell us a little more about you and Diversa.
Yeah, nice to meet you, everyone. My name's Caroline. I work at Diversa. I'm an associate director here. And essentially what we do is we focus on retained executive search. Over the last 30 years, our firm has been primarily focused in the software Silicon Valley tech landscape, working on VP and C-level roles anywhere across the functional spectrum, from go-to-market roles, product, engineering, some president, CEO, and GM roles. And over the last, call it 10 years or so, we've been doing an increasing amount of what I call deep tech work. And so that was a pretty natural segue from, software into hardware into a focus on the broad theme of climate. So over the last 3 to 4 years, we have been deepening our footprint in the climate landscape. And I've been doing a lot of that work alongside a couple of really talented colleagues of mine. And essentially, that part of my time is focused on specific searches that I'm running, and there's only a handful at any given time that I am running. But the other part of my time that I've been focusing on a lot is just helping executives get plugged into the climate space, connecting with climate communities I've been involved with companies that I see are doing a lot of hiring, whether on the executive front or not, and just trying to bolster up the broader ecosystem and get executives who have not been historically in a climate oriented role into the climate space, and hopefully into a specific role at some point as well.
Amazing. I'm looking forward to digging into some of your learnings from this year about that. But before we do, another kind of quick fire round, and I'm limiting you to one word. If you could describe the 2024 job market through your own lens in one word, what would it be? And we're going to go in the same order. So Brendan, I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah. Roller coaster. It was a roller coaster.
Roller coaster. Okay. Let's start strong. Roller coaster. Antoinette, one word.
Creative. Companies and job seekers had to be creative.
Oh, I love that. Okay, fascinating. Caroline.
I would say confused. Similar to the roller coaster, I think the market kind of just meandered and there's a lot of confusion. And I think that I have a more optimistic word for the next year, but confused is 2024.
Okay, I want to take roller coaster and confused and ask you and Caroline, yourself and Brenton in particular, what you've seen to inform that one word choice. Why has it been a roller coaster? What have some of the ups and downs been? And why are you feeling like it's been a kind of confusing time for both job seekers and companies alike?
Brendan, go ahead if you want to jump in, and then
I'll go first. I think that there's three main factors as far as there's a lot of reasons for it. Actually, there's probably more than three, but there's three top ones. I think number one is we've had unemployment is low, but for the types of the labor workforce that predominantly makes up climate tech, or the people who are interested in moving into climate tech, those are the folks that actually have been laid off by big tech or big corporations, and they're interested in transitioning their careers into climate. The challenge is that funding has been lower in climate tech, that the majority of the companies in climate tech are still startups, earlier stage startups. And so those companies tend to hire very specific talent at those early stages. That doesn't always match up with the skills of those people that may have been recently unemployed or interested in transitioning their careers. Early stage companies tend to look for very specific skill sets. And then the third factor is what's happened with job searching in general. I just think that finding a job right now is very difficult because of the advancements in AI, that people are using AI. One-click apply. There's just information overload out there in terms of job applications. So candidates are applying to jobs, they're not hearing anything. Companies are getting inundated with applications. And one thing we'll talk, I'm sure this will come up often, but one thing that I know, and I'm sure that Caroline can attest to this as well, in terms of when you're partnering with a company on the climate side, every single customer I've ever worked with in climate tech is deeply valuing mission alignment. And it's really hard to figure out mission alignment if you have 1,000 people that have applied to a job. So inevitably what they end up doing is they go back to their networks. And so it's very frustrating for job seekers. It's really overwhelming for hiring companies. You have just fewer jobs that are very specific with a lot of people looking for those jobs. So it's just been a lot of ups and downs. my take.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with a lot of those elements there. And, I don't have to beat the dead horse, but AI and the fast adoption of that across the board has definitely added to some of the confusion amongst how are we finding people, how are we sourcing people, how are we qualifying people, but then also from more of like a macro level, what are the companies that are hiring doing in terms of their AI strategy? So on the executive side of things, we work on a retained fee. So I share that because that influences when companies are ready to retain us. And that was part of the confusion we saw this year was, um, what are we doing with our own strategy? Are we even in a place where we can focus on important hires, or do we need to hunker down, figure out what we're doing as a business, and then be in a place to go make our hires? We definitely saw a couple of pauses throughout the year. The other thing that's inevitably part of the discussion is the election in the US. I know the MCJ is a global community, but I personally do a lot of my work in the US, and we have a partner based in London who does more of our global work. And I think that across the board, there was sort of this buildup of uncertainty and confusion and a lot of pause around the election time. And then after the election, there was a little bit of an exhale, and obviously there was a lot of other emotions that came with it. But the main point being now people can make some decisions and figure out where to go based on the outcome. The one other thing that I would point to is just the narrative from climate companies. I've seen an evolution of when we are pitching a company to a candidate, for example, not just talking about we are a climate company as the main pitch, but being able to talk about the business fundamentals. So obviously I'm talking about it now from the company perspective, but from a candidate perspective, I'm sure there's been a lot of confusion around that as well of, yes, I'm excited to be working with this climate company, but is this company going to last for the long haul? What are the fundamentals of it? And is it something that I feel that I can really be contributing towards with my skill set?
Fascinating. I want to come back to that communication piece because that's something we've absolutely seen at MCJ, and a prediction I have for next year is that that will be more prevalent than ever, and it's job seekers are going to have to kind of like wrap their head around and adapt to. But just coming back to that point around AI, how are you seeing organizations use it? Why would that lead to them kind of pausing or figuring out, for example, how to engage with the Versa? And then I guess like a third point, if I can add a third point to that question, for anyone on this call, how should job seekers be aware of how companies are using it? How is it affecting how job seekers engage and interact and apply to these roles?
I think the quick response, and just in terms of how that affects when companies are ready to engage with us as a firm, is more so a comment of a company's AI strategy. Like I've seen so many companies this year have to figure out, okay, if we did not have AI embedded into our core product before this year, how are we going to do that and therefore be a competitive company? Because I do think that we'll see a natural consolidation of companies. So that's another thing that I would just encourage people to look out for. There are a lot of, climate companies that have gotten their Series A funding and are going to have to solidify, what the next step looks like and be able to eventually get into that growth stage funding. And so just as a candidate thinking through, what do I see as the vision for this company? And could I see myself kind of growing into that new strategy that's evolving? There's just a lot of moving pieces, I think. And Brendan, I wonder, and Antoinette, if you all would have other thoughts in terms of from a candidate perspective, like how when applying to jobs, how AI influences that process. I don't have as much of an opinion on that, but we would be curious to hear.
Maybe I can just speak from experience of receiving applications from early talent who have been incorporating AI. While I think it's a tool to help folks become more efficient and maybe help think through how they talk about themselves, how they talk about a skill set, how they can respond to interview questions better, etc. I do think there is an obviousness from the people who are receiving resumes, short answer, um, just kind of written prompts. And I think sometimes an awareness of lack of attention to detail. Because, you know, as you're prompting AI, most of the time it includes something in the response that's like, hey, this is what I came up with for the answer to this question. And sometimes when we receive application, that part is not removed. So sometimes there's like the more
Oh boy.
obvious awareness that's like, okay, this person did use a chat GPT or whatever to answer this question. But I also think what it is contributing to is maybe a lack of or again this obviousness that like things aren't personal. I think when people are receiving emails or like you said those one-click applications, it's very obvious that there wasn't maybe thought, care, individualization to sending an email to a specific person. It's very aware sometimes. It's like, okay, you probably sent this email to 100 other people or 100 other companies. You probably sent this version of your resume to all, you know, the people you can because you have a numbers game strategy. So I think those are just some of the things that I'm aware of as I receive applications, as I receive emails. If you are using AI, if you are using Chat GPT, it's taken away a little bit of that personalized touch. And I think a lot of us who review things often are becoming more aware of that and being more sensitive to when we can kind of tell something has been somebody has led with AI versus using it as a tool to influence, impact, improve their application document or their email document. So I'll keep
The
it there.
personalization that stands out almost more now as a result, which I think is quite interesting. You mentioned your work was creative, which I love. Amidst the like confusing roller coaster year for both companies and talent, respectively, how have you seen businesses and talent be creative this year? I'd love to kind of understand more what you meant by that word.
Yeah, I think a bunch of things. I think, and it was kind of going to be my word for next year as well. I think there are a lot of companies trying to be creative around where they post their jobs. There are so many, I think, especially in climate, we're inundated with like, okay, here's this new job board, or here's this new website, or here's this new resource that you can take advantage of, like the when and where and how. I think from a candidate perspective, again, I do think that people see AI as an opportunity to be creative and, like I said, more efficient and understand more strategies for how to apply to different roles. I think there are a lot of creative opportunities now as far as maybe like networking or navigating this new workforce. So I think of like open door climate, which maybe isn't a new innovative idea, but at least it's an opportunity for like I move people there all the time of like, okay, if you want to talk to a person, there are people who have signed up that are willing to talk to you about their career, their background, their whatever. So I've seen a lot of kind of new organizations or things popping up to help people navigate this new work, or maybe not new workspace, but navigate coming in to climate in an attempt to be a resource. So I think that's what I mean. Is just like I'm seeing companies trying to be creative around how they get the talent and where the talent comes from. I see job seekers, particularly if they're laid off, trying to figure out how to improve their skill set, how to upskill their resume, how to talk about themselves better. And then also just organizations trying to fill that gap around how to connect again the talent to the companies.
Totally. I think if anything, it's an interesting almost sign of this is a very kind of broad sweeping statement, but almost a sign of like health in this space. The fact that there are so many potential roles and so many people interested, I think wasn't necessarily the case a couple of years ago. So I think that the kind of like popping up of all these different routes can be overwhelming and confusing and a lot to navigate, but on the whole, I think we should definitely see as a good thing. I am curious how we feel the mismatch or match of supply and demand has been this year. Brenton, I'd love your thoughts a little bit on that. I was reflecting on this time last year, and I feel like 2023 was really, really interesting with some big tech layoffs, which kind of set quite a big tone for the year back in January 2023. And I'm just curious as to how you've seen the fluctuations between supply and demand and what you maybe predict going into the first couple of months of 2025, Brendan. I know January is as big tech as of doing layoffs in January. So,
I'm starting to lose you right there at the end, Leonie. You were kind of breaking up a little bit, but I think I have the gist of what you were saying. I think, yeah, I think you're right. I think there was a real imbalance of the supply and demand of jobs. There was a lot more job seekers than there were jobs, certainly starting at the end of 2023, throughout really all of 2023 from our perspective. And that changed over the this year, but I think it changed in some way. Like certainly people were landing jobs in climate. I actually saw a lot of people end up just having to get jobs outside of climate, and so I think that there's more hiring that was happening this year than there was last year. And I think there were a lot of folks that were able to stick through and whether they were fortunate enough either to be working whilst also conducting a 12 to 18 month search to find a climate job, or those that maybe were able to afford to not work and really continue to stick with it. There were a lot of people that unfortunately that I know that ended up transitioning to other industries because they just couldn't wait any longer, which meant it brings the supply of available talent down. But I don't know that all of that talent didn't all go into climate. I do think that next year, the expectation is that the economy will continue to grow. We'll talk about some of the trends and some of the things that we are seeing, or at least hearing, in terms of what sectors and industries might grow versus where there might be some contraction. But I think overall, I'm hopeful that we're going to see growth going into next year, and that from a job seeker perspective, there will be a supply of jobs. There's a question that Wendy asked. We don't need to answer it right now, but I definitely want to answer this question because it actually does tie in a little bit to like, how do you navigate the job market? Because AI isn't going to go away as it relates to managing and navigating the job market. And so again, we can talk about it, but I want to weave that in at some point through our conversation today.
sure. I'd love to hear your perspective a little bit on some of the like supply demand trends you've seen over the last year, Caroline, for Exact Talent specifically, and then any predictions you have kind of going into the first couple of months of next year.
Yeah, so if I heard you right, it was just trends on what we've seen in this last year and then going into next year. Yeah. So in terms of things that I've seen over this last year, I would say, and maybe I'll speak to even the last month, because again, I think that the election has shifted a lot of things and areas of interest in terms of sectors. So what I have been seeing is definitely a rise in energy transition companies, nuclear in particular. We're doing some work with a couple of nuclear fission companies and then also nuclear fusion. Nuclear fusion, obviously just having a very long time horizon. That's a pretty interesting space to work in. And it's been a lot of learnings on my side, but a lot on the energy transition side. And I think that will continue to remain, sorry, just reading your note there. That will continue to remain true. And overall, we're just seeing a lot of movement on the hard tech side of climate. Software still continues to grow, but we're seeing a lot of investment in the hard tech side. Again, climate, I see as much more of a broader theme than any particular sector, but there's this interesting blend of, obviously after the US election, we're seeing a rise in defense tech as well. And I just talk about that because a lot of our work A lot of our work, like we think about it as hard tech, frontier tech, and climate is distinct from that. But those are some of the surges that we're seeing. And I think that we're going to see a blending of some of those areas. Yeah, in terms of trends of next year, I mean, I'm just calling into an echo chamber here, but intersection of AI and climate, I think there will be some really exciting and interesting applications coming in the next 12 to 18 months. You look at weather forecasting and what AI is able to do there. You look at shifting the environmental compliance space for the built environment. I'm seeing a lot of interesting companies rise up there. So I think that there is going to be like net new applications and therefore companies to be looking at that we don't even have on our radar this year, but next year there's going to be a lot of interesting companies in that space. So as long as folks are willing to, jump in for an early stage company and take on that ride, there'll be a lot of cool things to be considering.
Awesome. We have so much to cover today. It's like insane that we could speak for hours and hours on this. There are two things I definitely want to cover as a group, and then we are going to split into breakout rooms. And I think that will be an opportunity for a lot more kind of like tactical advice. I know quite a few questions have come through that are specific to a certain skill area or a seniority or kind of case. So prep those for the breakout rooms. But one topic that we keep touching on, and we might as well just address head on, is the change of administration in the US in January. Everyone was thinking about it. Everyone is thinking about the way that the IRA will kind of like continue to evolve, and any commitments from that will emerge. We had one question from Corey, who might be on the school, which said, interested in what downstream effects the committed IRA investments will have in the job market, whilst also balancing out the high likelihood that the next administration will not continue the policies that the Biden administration supported. Curious as to all of your perspectives on this. How are your organizations thinking, or how are your strategies as an organization evolving or changing, if they are, in response to the change in administration in January? And do you foresee any impacts of that change in administration on the job market?
One thing. Go ahead, Brendan.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to be succinct here. I think that the new administration will peel back some of the pieces to the IRA, but not much of it, because similar to the Affordable Care Act, when Trump came into office the last time around with Obamacare, and he said day one he's getting rid of it, and then he couldn't get rid of it because it's too popular. The IRA is very popular, and it's particularly popular amongst Republican districts. So I believe, and Natalie will share this report. I read a report recently. It was actually back in August, but there was a report around where the money is going. And I think 85% of the IRA is actually going into congressional districts that were led by Republicans. And that represents 77% of the job growth. So it's a very, very popular piece of legislation that's definitely impacting these red congressional districts. So they might peel back parts of it. So maybe it's the EV and the wind and solar tax credits. But then the other side of it, and Caroline mentioned this around energy transition. The other side of it is that Republicans are about less regulation, and so if they roll back some of the regulations around like permitting reform, and we can get more transmission and interconnection, the majority of the interconnection queue is loaded with renewable energy projects. So I think there's still going to be a huge demand for climate-oriented job growth that comes from the Inflation Reduction Act. But I think where those jobs lie will be interesting. It might be around nuclear, it might be around hydrogen, it might be around a lot of the energy transition. So for us, our strategy as a firm is going to be to try to narrow in on where is the money. We have seen a real pullback in certainly corporate investment over the last, companies are pulling back on their commitments to net zero. I think it was earlier this week or last week, I think it was Goldman Sachs pulled back on a major commitment that they had met just for disclosure purposes. So I think the ESG side of things and like corporate sustainability commitments are probably going to pull back, and there may not be as much job growth there. But I think in terms of the actual energy transition and infrastructure, critical materials and mining, especially if we're going to have tariffs with China, I think there's going to be a huge opportunity for those types of things here in the US, like domestic sourcing of those materials. So if it's battery recycling or whatnot, I'll stop talking because I'll go on for a while, but I do think there's going to be a lot of job growth. As a job seeker, it's going to be on you to actually do this research and figure out where are those growth opportunities. Are there companies in my state? The other thing that I would add here is that because so much of this is hard tech, a lot of these jobs are in person or hybrid. And so remote work, depending on the type of job that you're applying for, I'm seeing a move away from remote first employment to more in-person or at least hybrid, which makes regional job searching a priority at this point. So again, I'll stop. I'm talking too much.
That was awesome. Antoinette, Caroline, we'd love to hear what you think as well.
I'll just say really quick, thank you for that. Y'all should be listening. He has the major keys. I think the only thing that I would just follow up on is like the work continues regardless of what administration, regardless of who's in office. Like the work that is happening in climate is needed. Investments will continue. I agree that I always tell our job seekers, like, follow the money. Wherever there's investment, like, it's not magic. It's not just money for money's sake. Like, they need staff, they need people to be able to implement whatever this investment was for. The work is needed. I agree for this regional strategy, in person opportunities. And I think as we think about some of the things that may be rolled back or the impacts administration is going to have on policy or how organizations are going to be looking at their business and changes, even something that's important to us related to like equity and Justice 40 and all these community related things. Um, a lot of community-based organizations, nonprofit, local entities are going to be picking up that slack. So I also encourage you all to look at smaller organizations, things outside of, this cool climate tech startups and all these things like community engagement, local government, nonprofit, grassroots, organizations as well. I encourage you, especially if you have this regional in-person perspective, and especially for early career, think about how your skills can continue to be developed in this sort of mindset and organization level, and how that could still contribute to climate and add to your resume, so that if you do want to leverage it and convert back to a startup environment or a corporate entity, like you have something to build off of too. And then really quickly, I'll just say as an organization, something that we are thinking about, and I think a lot of organizations in this space are wrestling with, is how to continue this work while also navigating the very real possibility that people like to sue, especially if it's related to equity related things, diversity related things. And so much of this work happens in community. So I think that's going to be a huge piece. And I think a huge asset that someone can bring to an organization is an equity lens, is a policy lens, is a lens that helps organizations navigate the real uncertainty certainty that's coming with the Trump administrations and the people that he will pick and the folks that will be empowered to make policy changes. So that's another thing that I just wanted to share.
The only things that I would add to that, I second everything that Brendan said there, and also Antoinette. Those are all great points. I put a LinkedIn post in the chat that is just around the IRA and supporting that it may very well largely stay intact based on where that money is actually being spent in red districts. The one other piece that I would add is that, everyone's talking about the huge energy usage that will come from AI data centers to fuel that. I think a lot of people fairly are looking at that with a lot of skepticism and frustration. But I just read a piece recently that was talking about how this is actually a really big opportunity for those larger, big five tech companies to invest in alternative energy sources to supplement and hopefully supersede at some point the energy that's required to fuel AI data centers. So that's why I would just continue to push energy as a really important area to be looking at, because with the rise of AI, there's also going to be a rise, hopefully, in alternative energy sources and clean energy sources to fuel that.
Amazing. If there are any posts, that one sounds cool, Caroline. If there are any posts that you've seen, super helpful to share in the chat. We are about to break for breakout rooms. I promise I will stop asking this panel questions, but I can't. There's one more that we do need to touch on, and we've got to make this quick. And it leads on to everything that we're saying. I think the conversation around climate tech, climate skills, green skills is evolving, has been evolving. It feels like it's been evolving very, very fast, especially over the last 2 months. And one thing I know that we're seeing, and as an MCJ, obviously we started as a podcast, and so for us, thinking through how we are communicating about the work that we're doing is really part of our DNA. We are seeing a shift similar to what you mentioned, Caroline, at the beginning, of how businesses are communicating that they are having climate impact. Feel like fewer businesses are riding on the term, fewer businesses are signaling it up front. A lot of businesses are focusing on their business case that will weather any kind of storm or any kind of public sentiment. We don't need to do everyone with opinions, but if you have opinions as a panel on how you're seeing like communication or how you're predicting communication about climate tech companies and climate focused roles will shift over the coming months, I would love to quickly hear it.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. I mean, my company is called Climate People. I've been thinking about this a lot. We're not changing our messaging because I think at the root of our mission and what we're trying to do is we are trying to partner with companies that are directly addressing these issues. But I'm seeing on the company side that this is changing, and some organizations are potentially reframing the way that they're talking about it because they're supporting utilities, and maybe utilities, electric utilities, number one concern isn't necessarily reducing emissions. It could be around grid resiliency or security or things like that. So I think that it might be a reframing, energy tech or infrastructure tech, or call it whatever you want, tech, right? That is supply chain technology. Well, that already exists, but like these are all things that we could still decarbonize. It may not be under the umbrella or pitched as climate tech, which puts even more onus on individual job seekers to do the research to figure out companies that are developing solutions that are addressing decarbonization in these various sectors of the economy. The companies aren't going to stop doing the thing that they're doing. They just might be called something different.
And just real quick, I just want to share how much of a skill set that is. So again, early career talent, those that have communications, marketing, public affairs mindsets. I know there's a lot more tech people on this call, but I think there's going to be a really big focus, to Brendan's point, on the how of communicating. Like I said, the work is going to continue, but how that gets relayed, reframed, what words people are going to specifically choose to use or replace within their websites or in their grant applications or in the public eye, it is important. And so those that have the skill set to help companies and organizations have these conversations and kind of do these rebrands, just calling out that is a skill set and a job and work that is going to be happening and right now is happening into 2025 and beyond.
Lots of smiling faces. Okay, fantastic. I would love to hear from some of the breakout room leaders. Caroline, there you are. One key takeaway, one key thing that you discussed.
Quickly, we did have 60-second warning, so Brendan and
not everyone.
People are still there, so we only have Caroline's group back right
now. We
now.
only have Caroline's group. Okay, Caroline, we can still recap. What was one key thing that you guys discussed?
One thing that we talked about was just really leaning on connections. And when you find a company, even whether it's a specific role that you're interested in or just a company that you're interested in at large, going onto LinkedIn and clicking onto the company and clicking first connections, second connections, seeing who you have connective tissue to that's associated with that company and reaching out, making it informal, but saying, hey, really interested in what you're building. Can we grab a coffee? I don't know what your hiring plans even look like, but just in general, would love to make the connection.
Love that. Love that advice so much. We have 1 minute left, so I'm going to swing over to Natalie to tell us a quick snippet about what January's session will be before we wrap up on time.
Yeah, certainly. So yeah, in January, we're going to be talking about success stories. So we're going to have a few different people who have landed jobs in climate using focused networking. So people who had success in really narrowing their scope, pinpointing their few climate solutions, like Brendan was talking about earlier, creating a market map of companies and then reaching out to those companies and ultimately landed jobs that way. I think that's some general job searching advice that floats around climate. So wanted to bring those stories to life with a few people who have had success in doing that. So gonna drop a link. Oh, Leonie, I dropped a link in the chat to that. So feel free to register for that session in January. And then, yeah, come to get inspired by some people who have landed jobs in this space.
Amazing. It's going to be a really good one and just ties on to what you were saying, Caroline. So that's a nice through line. Thank you all so much for joining, and in particular, thank you to Antoinette, to Caroline, and to Brendan for speaking, and also to Natalie for the 12 sessions we have run this year, which is kind of insane. Wishing you all a very, very happy holiday, a wonderful end to the year. We'll look forward to seeing you in January.
Yeah. Thanks, Leonie, for a great session. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.